still remain part of Ukraine. So in this sense, we have every reason to affirm that Ukraine is an artificial state.
Okay, no, I love the way you just said, do it at the end. No, we've got to do it now. Obviously, that interview is courtesy of the Tucker Carlson channel, and you can watch the full interview there. Okay, so let's get Erol Morkoc. He is a spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK. So, look, I don't know whether the Republican Party and its UK affiliates are happy or sad this interview took place. Clearly, it's fairly wide-ranging, and it's important to understand what Vladimir Putin thinks without, and doing that should not necessarily suggest that we support his activities.
Oh, I can concur completely. And I think if you ask your average American person, perhaps a non-political actor, they would love to hear the voice of the person who we're at war with. I don't think that interviewing, I don't know when journalism became a crime. Barbara Walters interviewed Vladimir Putin. Many people have interviewed all sorts of...
They were all putting in bids for him. The BBC, everyone was putting in bids. They just weren't getting accepted.
Is that right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's an attempt to castigate Tucker Carlson, who has a natural, let's say...
dislikability to the left.
Yeah, they dislike him. They hate the truth. They hate that he's abrasive and gets to the point. And I think once they... I mean, I remember AOC gloating, we got rid of Tucker Carlson off Fox News, goodbye. Well, I think the joke's on them. Tucker Carlson went from being a great American journalist to a great world journalist, and somebody who's going to be, going down in history as one of the only people to try to bring, let's go with discord, at the very least, between our two countries. I mean, outside of Oliver Stone and the Putin interviews from back in 2014 or 15, the Western market has had almost no entree to see or hear from the person who was apparently crazy.
Do you think that this war could have been prevented if we'd been a bit more realistic? Because, look, this is something that Gary alluded to earlier, though he didn't say it explicitly. Very few people, I think, can say they've done more in terms of supporting Ukraine than me. I mean, I appreciate, I'm just a civilian volunteer, but obviously I ran a significant aid operation that continues to be ongoing. But what people do not understand is Ukraine is not the Garden of Eden. This is a former Soviet republic. It suffers from a significant level of corruption.
Apparently worse than Russia, the more oligarchs.
Yeah, so it suffers from racial tensions. The Azov regiment are neo-Nazis. There is a problem with that. Discrimination against Russian people. I mean, we've seen videos which are authenticated where people have, and let me try and say this politely, ethnic Russians have been stripped naked, then cling filmed to lights and lampposts, and then dog food is smeared on their private parts. The results being really pretty graphic and horrendous, and not something that I would describe.
They said they were collaborating, didn't they?
But clearly there is discrimination, and I think that in that sense Russia is right. The problem is the invasion has made the whole thing significantly worse. But then I guess my question to you is to return to the original point. Had we recognised that Ukraine was not the Garden of Eden, do you think life would have been a lot easier right now?
110%. I mean, my day job when I'm not here on your show is I work in the defense industry. And I've worked directly with Ukrainian military on procurement in this war. Yes. And the amount of corruption that I've seen firsthand, I probably shouldn't be saying this live, has been atrocious.
Well, we've got. Well, I will tell you, Erol. There is a warehouse in Kiev where 90% of aid is stolen within the first 24 hours of it being supplied.
Sounds like Hamas.
That'd be 100%.
So do you feel that the reason that that the support was thrown so wholeheartedly behind the Ukraine by the current American administration is because of Biden's links to the Ukraine and his financial interests over there?
His son, yeah.
I think there's a connection. I wouldn't draw that away, but I would almost point to the lack of historical knowledge that his administration brought to the table. They simply did not realize that they were going to have, a real opposition. They simply did not realize that Ukraine, wasn't guaranteed to have to go to war. And I think their perspective of Ukraine, what they thought was possible, didn't match what was on the ground. So you have these connections, but you also have a historical ignorance.
Okay,
and
so
the idea
both.
that they could build bases all the way to the border and not have any pushback. I mean, that started with Obama, where Joe Biden was. Joe Biden was sort of the key guy in Ukraine for the majority of the Obama regime, and as you saw, the interplay between his son.
By the way, just for our viewers and listeners, because Errol, a lot of the things you're going to say are going to be really obvious to an American audience, perhaps not as obvious to a British audience. So forgive me for teaching everyone to suck eggs, but just to be clear, that Hunter Biden, whose previous experience was having been thrown out of the US military for smoking crack, became an expert in oil and gas and was paid $50,000 a month to work in Ukraine before the war. Now, I don't think there's any suggestion that the Ukrainian government was involved in any corruption there, though they did fire the prosecutor who wanted to take charge against him. But clearly, Hunter Biden, Hunter Biden does not have any qualifications in geology, geography, chemistry, or indeed anything else that you would need to be an oil trader.
He knows a bit about chemistry.
What about cracking the rocks?
The question, I think the really important question here is whether this support for Ukraine goes right throughout the Democrat Party in the US, or is it just Hunter Biden and his father, or does it go far beyond, way into the Democrat Party? Because that's a link for the future. Biden won't be around very much longer, I don't think. I don't see him being re-elected. I actually see him being replaced by the Democrats.
Yes,
probably it'll be Michelle Obama, in my view.
Yeah. So
the question is, does this support for Ukraine and the Democrat Party go so deep that it might end up causing World War III?
But let me ask you that question then, because so Errol can answer what you've just said, but I also want to ask you this question before we go to Errol. It's often said that the reason we're fighting in Ukraine, because if Vladimir Putin is a bloodthirsty conqueror, and to be fair, there's some evidence he is, then the next country will be a NATO country, and actually we have to fight in Ukraine in order to prevent it. So what's your view on that?
My feeling is we have to defend NATO countries. The West has to do that. It's got an obligation to do so. And that's the bottom line there.
But I don't think Putin would attack NATO.
So Errol,
I actually agree with you on that, Ash. I agree with you.
Yeah.
So Errol, you've got two questions there. First of all, on the depth of support for Ukraine in the Democrat Party, but also whether this is not right, whether we should continue to do what we're doing in order to defend the integrity of NATO itself.
Look, it's a great question because it speaks to the Democrat Party psyche. If you ask your average Democrat or average American to find Ukraine on a map, they would struggle. Maybe now they could find it. It's been whatever. But it's part of the Democrat religion. The same LGBTQ flag in the Twitter profiles is flown next to Ukraine flag. Right. It's become part of their identity as they are. This, by the way, used to be an anti-war peace party. There's no peace marches. There's no calls for detente. Right. So it's ingrained in their religion.
It's become a fashion.
They circle the wagons.
So hang on, Errol, let me ask you this then. So are we finding that the same people who are marching for war in Ukraine are marching for peace in Israel?
Yes. You've got nailed it on the head. I know people. I've got people out there. They're marching around with Palestinian flags with black.
Except
black
they're not marching for peace, are they?
Well, they're not. They're not really marching.
And you can predict all their political views. You can predict there'll be net zero. You can predict every single one of their views.
That's right.
The same guys gluing their hands to the. I see the people gluing themselves to the street in your country. It's the same guys.
Errol, do us a favour. I think we're going to talk a little bit more, but why don't we go to a break now, and we'll come back to you in just about a minute.
Take a breath.
Hey, very good morning to you.
Thanks for joining us.
You're with
Should Hamas stay in power, and are they a terror group? You're refusing to answer either of them. That is very telling.
Talk TV. It's the only place where you get the truth.
You've done a book on poetry. Poetry and music for the many. I love poetry. We can agree on that.
Show with Andre Walker and Asher Gould. We're still here with Erol Morkoc. So, Erol, the question I wanted to ask you before you go, and apologies that we've kept you over the break, what effect do you think this Putin interview will have on the American political system?
I think it's going to have an impact because the most intellectually curious voters are, by definition, the undecideds, right. The people who are still looking. And those are the kind of people who are going to all of a sudden see, hey, perhaps we've been spending our birthright on a war with somebody who, I'm not here to defend Vladimir Putin. I'm not here to say what he's doing is right, but he's not a madman. He's not a deranged person.
But he is also, firstly, a thief. You know, the level of government theft and misappropriation is unbelievable. He's also somebody who has cracked down on journalists. He is somebody who has effectively abolished the democratic system in Russia to the extent it ever existed.
And they need Russian leaders to improve their popularity.
Looking at it,
I agree completely with that. I'm not here to excuse that. I'm only here to say that the American people, the curious people in America, have never even heard his perspective.
No.
So if they can internalize that, if we can see each other as people, I think
we'll run out of time, Gary.
Yeah, but looking at it from the perspective of the American people, they will say pretty well with regard to Russia and Ukraine, a plague on both your houses. Think of all the money America is spending and how much better that money could be spent at home. That's what they're going to think. Whether they like Ukraine or whether they like Russia, it'll make no difference. They're going to look at what's in their interest.
But also, look at 1963, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Putin is just pointing out the same thing that America objected to with Kennedy.
Also, I'm sorry to say this, and I'm sorry to lower the tone, but I support Ukrainian immigration into Britain because they're pretty much all hot.
Yeah, but also they all will want to move back.
God,
that really surprises me. That
no, they are hot. They are all hot.
No, I know, but you saying it's just a shock.
Okay, Erol, I invite you to comment on whether Ukrainian refugees are pretty much all hot.
I think that they are lovely and symmetrical-looking people.
Okay, Erol Morkoc from spokesperson for Republican. He's never been asked that on the national broadcast.
They're very symmetrical, the Ukrainians.
I do love a symmetrical man.
Yeah, okay, a symmetrical man. I mean, that's an odd definition. Okay, look, we're gonna drill through a load of calls.